Hello, and welcome to the We're Not Stumped podcast. I'm your host, Mike Boland, and I'm a congenital amputee of the right hand. In this show, I will interview other amputees and allow them to tell you their incredible life stories. I'll also feature family members of amputees and others who support the amputee community, all in an effort to discuss the challenges and triumphs of those living with limb loss. So stick around and listen to inspirational stories and find out why we say, we're not stumped. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the We're Not Stumped podcast. I'm your host, Mike Boland, and today I got Kara Skrubis on. For almost her entire life, Kara has had a passion for ballet. She competed across the country and shared her joy for dance, teaching ballet, and eventually enrolling at the University of Buffalo as a dance instructor. In 2019, Kara felt extreme pain in her left knee, but as it turns out, this pain was not brought on by an injury from dancing or ballet. We'll hear from Kara what the source of that pain was and what it's meant for the rest of her life in the We're Not Stumped podcast. So Kara, first of all, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the podcast today.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, we always start the podcast with a segment I call In Your Own Words, so I'd love to hear more about your story.
Yeah, so I grew up training pre-professional ballet since the age of 3. I trained all across the East Coast. And then, as you said, I went on to the University of Buffalo to major in dance. A few months into that dance major, I had a pretty extreme knee pain and I went to a few urgent cares. They all told me it was sprained muscles. It started to get swollen and hot to the touch, and they thought it was bursitis or a blood clot. And then eventually, after 3 months of misdiagnoses, I got an x-ray that showed a tumor. I got that biopsied, and it was osteosarcoma, which is a rare pediatric bone cancer. My tumor was in my left tibia, so right underneath the knee. I immediately did 9 months of chemotherapy. I also had a left above the knee amputation, and then I went on to do 8 months of immunotherapy. I relearned how to walk, relearned how to dance. I enrolled back in school. I got 2 degrees in psychology and health and human services. Now I work for a nonprofit that helps make it better for kids and families affected by osteosarcoma, and I'm super happy to be here.
That's fantastic. You were talking about some of the journey that you went on. If I read correctly, there was a time where they were thinking about trying to save the leg, but you said, you know what, it seemed like it was a long road for you, and it's like almost, you made the decision to go ahead and have the amputation. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, so typically with osteosarcoma of the leg, you're offered limb salvage, which you replace the bone with either a donor bone or an internal prosthesis, where you'd get to keep most of your leg. You are also offered rotation plasty, which is where they amputate above the knee and right above the foot. They take the foot, they put it backwards, and your ankle joint works as a knee joint. So it's just a different type of amputation where you'd still get somewhat of a knee joint. And then the other option is amputation. And when I was diagnosed, I already knew of a few amputees that were thriving out with their amputations. And I was not a stranger to the idea of amputation. So I just wanted it to be one and done, over with. I didn't want to have to go through revision surgeries or anything of that sort. So I just went ahead with it. I made the decision. I was 18 years old. So I was lucky enough to be the advocate for myself, and made the decision for my amputation. And I would say it worked out pretty well for me. I haven't had any reoccurrences or had to have any revision surgeries on my legs. So it's been, knock on wood, pretty simple.
Well, that is good news. But you mentioned a term that I hadn't heard of, and that's an internal prosthetic. What does that entail?
Yeah, so it's kind of like a hip or a knee replacement where they replace, in this case, your bone with titanium or some sort of metal. They're also starting it with donor bone, which is cadaver bone. It's a different and somewhat difficult process. A lot of the people who are diagnosed with osteosarcoma are in their younger teen years, so they're still growing. So with that, you would have to go through leg lengthening processes where you'd actually have to lengthen the either cadaver bone or titanium inside your body, or go through revision surgeries. But in that case, you do get to keep your leg. There are some limitations. You don't ever get to run again or do high impact sports. A lot of people have pain issues with internal prosthesis and kind of having a foreign body in your body. But yeah.
Well, with as active as you are now and continue to be, was that part of the decision for you, knowing that, hey, if I can't do high impact, I'm a dancer, I want to go down this path? Was that part of the process for you?
Yeah, I knew I wanted to get back into dancing in some form or another. And I just wanted to make sure that we got rid of as much of the disease as possible. And that's why amputation really worked out for me because my tumor was right below the knee and they amputated right above the knee. So they were able to make sure that we had really clean margins and that there was no evidence of disease in that leg at all. So that was kind of like another peace of mind for me as well, going with amputation.
And as I think of your journey, there's almost like two steps. And I think of the family. So number one, you had cancer, which is never a fun word to throw around, certainly with the family and your mom, Lisa, that I know. We're going to talk about her in a second. And then an amputation. How was that process for you and your family going through that?
Yeah, so like I said, I was 18, so it was really ultimately my decision, but I definitely had a lot of support around me. My mom was a really great advocate for me going through my diagnosis, and she was kind of on board with whatever I was on board for. She knew that whatever I chose, we would make it work and we'd go through it together. So luckily, I didn't have any issues with my family going through it, but they were all super supportive.
Yeah, that's great. And as you were talking about, I believe she did some research and found a organization that you're part of now called MIB Agents. I'd love to learn more about what they do and what you do there.
Yeah. So when I was going through treatment, my mom was kind of, it was also during COVID. I was diagnosed in January of
Oh,
2020. So I had a few months before the world and the hospital shut down and
yeah,
everything.
yeah.
So we were pretty isolated in my hospital room. So she was doing a lot of like online looking for support groups, looking for anyone else out there who had had osteosarcoma and survived, who could help talk us through things because it is such a rare cancer. And she ran across MIB Agents, which makes it better for all those affected by osteosarcoma. And they offer a multitude of programs. They offer Warrior Mail, where they send mail to those going through treatment. People from all across the world can send mail to someone going through treatment. They have
Wow.
gamer agents, which you can game with someone virtually who also had osteosarcoma, as kind of like a way to bridge connection. They also have an ambassador agents program where they pair someone in active treatment with someone 1 year plus out of treatment who has survived, which I was a part of and helped me greatly. I was actually paired with a girl who I'm friends with now who was above the knee amputee, graduated college, living her life. So it was really helpful to have her to talk to when going through the trenches. They also have a lot of fundraising opportunities and they work directly with doctors and researchers who are working specifically on osteosarcoma. So all the money that they raise goes specifically to osteosarcoma funded research. Osteosarcoma is actually the oldest cancer known to humankind. It's found in dinosaur bones. And there hasn't been a new drug added in the treatment in over 40 years. So a lot of people call it the forgotten cancer because people don't really fund for it for research and they also don't really research it because it's such a difficult and aggressive cancer. So the MIB agents really works on trying to fundraise, trying to create new research, create new trials so that there are more options out there for people with metastatic osteosarcoma. I first joined their programs, kind of got a feel for what they did, used them as support network. And then in 2021, I joined their junior advisory board, which is a group of 14 to, I believe, 23-year-olds who either had osteosarcoma, have osteosarcoma, or siblings of patients who have passed away from osteosarcoma. And they are able to work directly with doctors and researchers, give their input on things that they had trouble with during treatment, things that they like to see done better, kind of just tell the people in charge what needs to be fixed and also give a face and a name to osteosarcoma. So in 2021, I was a part of their board. In 2022, I was actually the president of the board.
Wow.
And in 2023, I got fully employed by MIB Agents as their social media manager. And then today, I actually this year, I accepted a new role as their junior advisory board manager. So I'm both their social media and junior advisory board manager, and I love what I do. Working for a nonprofit is super gratifying, and I'm always pushing for better treatments, better outcomes, and making it better for everyone involved.
You're doing a lot of great things. And the URL is at mibagents.org.
Yes.
I'll make sure that I link to that in the description, but certainly a shout out for the people that are just listening. If you need to learn more, go to mibagents.org. And I read a little bit more about you too as you were going through your process and your journey, that you saw other children going through something similar, which inspired you to help another younger generation. Would you like to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so I was diagnosed at the age of 18, which luckily for me, I was still considered pediatric. So I was in the pediatric hospital. So I was on the hematology oncology floor and definitely the oldest patient on the floor. Everyone else that was around me was anywhere from birth to, I'd say, probably 9 or 10. So it was difficult to see being older, all the kids going through treatments that were the same, if not worse, as mine. And so it really inspired me to do something. I always loved dance and I still dance, still teach dance. It'll always be a part of my life, but it really showed me that my life can be worth so much more than just dance and that I can still have a love for dance, but also give back to the community that gave me so much in the future.
I read a little bit more about you too when you were talking about your journey through prosthetics, and I think it was going through first a wheelchair and then maybe your starter prosthetic, and where you just talked about you're eventually back to dancing. How was that process for you going through getting fitted and maybe for the first time learning about prosthetics at that time?
Yeah, so the decision to amputate was definitely a lot easier than the actual process.
Hmm.
My surgery was successful. It was 6 hours, very simple. But I was non-weight bearing since the start of my diagnosis. So I was in a wheelchair for the 3 months before I had no surgery, and then I was in a wheelchair, I think, for at least 9 months after. I didn't start working with my prosthetic until I was fully out of treatment, just because of all the medications I was on and the swelling and just not feeling up to it, not having the energy to even attempt to walk. But when I did start getting my first prosthesis, it was difficult. It took a long time. I worked with a walker and with crutches and still working today in PT and just getting my gait as good as it can be. And some days are harder than others, but I'm super grateful to be able to have a prosthetic and be able to relearn how to dance.
One of the things I saw about you too is they had a feature about you in People magazine. That must have been quite an honor. What was that like?
Yeah, so at MIB Agents, we try to do anything and everything to get the word out. Any publicity is good publicity for us, just so we can get people knowing about osteosarcoma and what it is. So People Magazine actually was interested in my story, and I did an interview with them, and they published a feature on me, and that was super gratifying. I had a lot of people reach out to me and were interested in my story. And it's just so amazing to be able to tell people about osteosarcoma and what it is, because it is the forgotten cancer. And the more people know, the stronger our community can be.
Is there a Facebook group too for that? You have one of those, like a group?
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
across all social medias. There's support groups on social media too for, I'd say probably most cancers have support groups on Facebook. I mean, that's the beauty of Facebook. So
Well, after I asked that question, I'm like, well, wait a minute. I'm talking to the social media manager. Of course, there's a Facebook group. Yeah, it took me a second. I apologize. What is something that you've learned about being an amputee that maybe you didn't know before?
oh, that's a good question. I think that the journey is never ending. I think that's the same thing as being a cancer patient, honestly, is that you're not really done when you're done. That there are lasting effects and lasting struggles every single day. Not to say that it's the worst thing in the world, but different things affect the way that I walk. If I lose unexpected weight or put on unexpected weight, the fit of my socket's always changing due to like the volume of my limb and skin issues and friction issues and pain. And so it's kind of different day to day, and you never know really what the day's going to bring. Some days I'm in too much pain that I try not to walk as much. Other days I feel up for hiking and going on adventures. But I think it's like that with anything, like being a cancer survivor too, that just because my treatment's over doesn't mean that the lasting effects of cancer go away and that everything's completely fine. But yeah.
Anything about being out in public? Because as opposed to me, I never had a hand. So, but you went from, yeah, obviously full body. I don't know what the term is. I was never like that. But now you're wearing a prosthetic, and I'm sure people ask you questions. How was that for you being out and about?
Yeah, I mean, some days I like it, some days I don't. Some days I'm in a mental space where I don't want to remember that I'm an
Yeah,
amputee, and anything as simple as going out to the grocery store is enough for me to be reminded that I don't look the same way that most people do. But some days I really love it. I love to be asked. I love to be asked by kids, especially because when they ask, they come from a pure place of pure I guess not confusion, but just like wondering what it is and
yeah,
why. And it's been great to be able to teach kids, especially in dance, teaching them that there's no single dance body and that all bodies can dance and that we may not look the same and that's totally okay. The kids who I teach today still ask me things of how do you go swimming? And I know that they are asking from pure intention and pure good intention. And I'm always willing to answer their questions and let them know. And hopefully, it brings them to a point later in life where we can all just be accepting of each other and each other's bodies and kind of think that all bodies are beautiful.
yeah. Children are just naturally inquisitive to a certain extent.
Yeah.
So you talked about getting back into dance. How has that been for you? Is it? Yeah. Let me just leave it at that. How has that been for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's been fun. It's been fun to be able to kind of figure out new ways that my body can move. It's definitely not the same as it was before, but I feel fortunate enough to be in a place where I'm accepting of that and accepting that my life doesn't revolve around dance anymore. But I've been able to get some really cool opportunities with it. I was actually able to perform with the University of Buffalo dance majors for my senior year. They
That's
let
great.
me perform in their senior showcase where every single senior does a solo. So I was able to go on stage and perform one last time, which was super
Yeah.
gratifying to not have my last performance be with a tumor in my leg. And it's super gratifying to also be able to teach because it really just shows kids that there's no dance body and that I can still do it and I can still learn and I'm always learning from them as well. So, yeah.
Do you focus mostly on kids as you teach, or is it all ages?
It's all ages, but I'm mainly teaching kids right now. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's great because you'd be quite the person to look up to. Looking at you and being able to dance, somebody like me, I should be able to dance too. Well, maybe my age has something to do with my lack of ability, or just the lack of ability to dance. But that might be part of it. Because since you were 3 years old, you traveled the country. You said, is that going all over and doing all sorts of competitions?
Yeah, I love to do it. I love to learn. I danced mainly ballet, so I fell in love with the art and just honestly the perfection of it, which was definitely a mental shift because ballerinas traditionally have this expectation to be perfect and have everything look perfect and similar to each other. And it's been nice to be able to like reframe my mind that there is no perfect ballet body and dance body and that all bodies can dance. So, yeah.
That's great. As you look over your entire journey, and as you said, none of us are done necessarily, but if you were going to give any advice to someone that was either going through cancer or just recently having an amputation of any kind, what would be something you would like to tell them?
Yeah. So, I would say my motto is really take it one day at a time. I had to constantly remind myself of that in the hospital that it was really one day at a time. And when that got to be too much, it was 1 hour at a time, 1 minute at a time, 1 second at a time. That some days, if my biggest accomplishment was brushing my teeth, then that was something to celebrate and that, things will get better. And I think that goes for anyone going through any sort of hard time or hardship in their life that you just have to take it one day at a time and worry about the now instead of the future, and things will eventually get better.
Anything within the prosthetic journey too that you could share?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the same thing to take it one day at a
No,
time.
that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it starts off really slow and it feels so frustrating. I remember being so frustrated in the beginning to not be able to walk like I used to. And I didn't think I'd ever be able to be where I am today, that I can take my dog for walks and went to the Adirondacks and hiked a mountain there. And, it took a long time, but it will get better eventually. And that there are people out there who are willing to work with you to make sure that you can do anything. And that's kind of another thing that's been really cool about prosthetics is that you can do anything you really want to. I got a running prosthesis, which I was never a runner before, and I got a horseback riding prosthesis, so I can ride horses. And, there's nothing that you really can't do with prosthetics. And super exciting to see like the world of prosthetics be thriving as well. They're trying to figure out all new things all the time. So, yeah.
I love that story because it really says that there's additional possibilities after the prosthetics or the amputation, not just trying to get where you were necessarily, where you can do other things.
Yeah.
As far as the journey, there's been a few people that have been on that have talked about, hey, maybe I should have said something a little sooner about my socket fit, as an example. Is that something
Right.
you would recommend too? Like, just make sure you're your own voice and the person on the other end that's there to help you to communicate what you're feeling.
Yeah, definitely being an advocate for yourself is so important with prosthetics because if it's not perfect, then it's not going to work well. And it's definitely really hard to get it to be perfect because it's something that's much different than it was before, or much different than it should be. But being the biggest advocate for yourself is so important. If something doesn't feel perfect, then it should be fixed and it should be changed and worked on until it is perfect. Because with prosthetics, you're most likely using them a lot during the day and you don't want them to damage your skin or make things worse or give you additional pain where you shouldn't have pain. So, yeah.
What is next for Kara? What are you looking forward to? I know you're doing quite a bit. You're still a dance instructor. You're doing everything you were doing with MIB Agents, but what else is in the future for you?
Yeah, so right now I'm actually volunteering at my local children's hospital on their med surge floor, and I'm volunteering with child life. So I'm hoping to pursue a career in child life. I actually had child life specialists come and help me when I was in the hospital, so they inspired me to hopefully become one of them, but always going to have the dance in my life, always going to have the nonprofit. They really are, the MIB Agents is really the only leading osteosarcoma nonprofit out there. So it's super
Wow.
important we keep working and making sure that it gets better.
It's a very impressive website too. I found myself when I was looking at it learning so much. There's so much information on there. So I would say I don't know how the process is to get diagnosed, but once you are, that is the go-to place to find out more.
Yeah. Yep.
And I guess let me go back to the cancer because you know obviously it was a pain. Gosh, should I twist my leg or whatever it was? How did that work? You said they had to do an X-ray, and that's when they found the cyst. And then there was some biopsies and things like that. I mean, what is the diagnosis process for that?
Yeah, so I'd say like a good majority of people who've had or have osteosarcoma get misdiagnosed at first because it is something that presents itself as either leg pain or arm pain. Some people have osteosarcoma of the jaw, so it's
Oh,
just simply pain.
okay,
And it's not something that shows up on a blood test that you have cancer or, quick screening. So for me being a dancer, I obviously thought that I had pulled a muscle or done something wrong, went on my knee wrong.
yeah,
And the doctors didn't necessarily know what to do. Like I went to urgent cares at first and they just kind of looked at it and touched my leg and said, you probably sprained it. Then when it started, the tumor like really started to grow and it started to become a warm, localized lump. That's when we were very confused because it was pretty localized and pretty large. And so we thought blood clot because blood clots are usually hot to the touch and localized. And they did an ultrasound and that didn't show anything. But really, x rays are the main way that people get diagnosed with osteosarcoma because it is a bone tumor, and then biopsies to confirm it. But I would say with that too, being the biggest advocate for yourself, when I got these other diagnoses, I tried methods of pain relief and it was not working and it was getting better. And we were getting fed up and we kept going to different doctors and advocating for myself
yeah.
because nothing was getting better.
If if it would have been caught sooner, is it something that could have been prevented? The amputation could have been prevented. I apologize. I don't know enough about it, but having
Yeah.
people listening, I definitely want to make sure that they're educated as well as me.
Yeah, it's definitely hard to tell. There isn't enough research on it really, and it's such a tricky and rare disease that it's hard to tell if things would have been different if it
Hmm.
was caught early. Some people have metastases right from the start. Some people, their osteosarcoma presents more aggressively. I was lucky enough to have it be localized. Osteosarcoma mainly metastasizes to the lungs, so people will get lung nodules. And I was lucky enough to never have to get lung surgeries, but a lot of the other patients that I know have gone through multiple lung surgeries. It's it's so different for every person, especially like the tumor genetic too. Like osteosarcoma tumor genetics can look so vastly different. So it's another thing that we always try to advocate for patients is getting your tumor genetics tested just so that your doctors can kind of look into why is this tumor acting this way and what trials, what clinical trials, what treatments may be better for your type of tumor.
And again, just for my own edification, as I said earlier, you were saying that it could be on an arm, a jaw. So this is like any part of the body. Is that correct?
It is bones. It typically
Okay.
affects, in most cases, the long bones, so
Okay.
arms and legs.
Okay.
And it also has been found a few times in the jaw. Sometimes it just is crazy and unpredictable. I've known people where it's metastasized to the brain, or calcified in the bone or gone in the bloodstream. So we're still trying to figure it out, still trying to advocate for that research
Yeah.
because it is such a tricky disease and it's always unpredictable. But most diagnoses are in the long bones, the arms, and the legs.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. And like I said, I
Yeah.
hope that my questions just hopefully help others, because I hadn't heard of this particular one before I was introduced to you.
Yeah.
And you do such a fantastic job of communicating everything, whether it be your amputation or the cancer. So I just want to thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I've learned a lot, and I know that where you're going and what you're doing is helping so many others. So thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I hope that if anything, it gets osteosarcoma in the back of people's brains so that if someone were to ever have any sort of leg pain, that's just something that could be in the back of people's minds so that people, if by the terrible chance that someone were to be diagnosed, they could be diagnosed early as well.
And go to MIB Agents to find out more, not only about the cancer, but certainly they see your pictures on there as the social media manager, and check her out in People Magazine. I'll have all the links in the descriptions. And again, thank you for your time today. It really means a lot. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
That was the We're Not Stumped podcast, hosted by Mike Boland. If you want to be a guest on the program, reach out to Mike at his email address, mike@mikeboland.com. This podcast is produced by One Hand Man Productions. If you are looking to start your podcast, go to onehandmanproductions.com.